Good morning and welcome to Kramer's Corner with Daily Technical Update. It is Thursday the 19th of March. This video is for educational purpose only. There's no recommendation or advice whatsoever intended. It's purely to demonstrate how I try to read the market using technical analysis and show you how you can set up your charts, and you can do the same. So let's have a look at what happened in the US last night. I have here 16 charts of some of the biggest sectors in the US, and as we can see, it is still the oil sector that is pushing higher. Not a big surprise really. Here is the oil and gas exploration sector that is pushing higher. We have the oil service lacking a little bit, but still in a bullish trend, and I think after what we see in the oil and gas market later, they are likely to also crawl higher. What is dragging on the markets in general? It is the healthcare sector that is really being beaten at the moment. It is the retail sector. Here we have the consumer staples sector that is also being beaten quite badly. We have the materials sector, and here have the retailers also being beaten at the moment. We can also see here rare earth metals, they are also lower, and the metal sector in general also fairly weak. But what is doing fairly okay is the technology sector here, expanded tech sectors, software. So they are not dragging that much of them. They have done basically since the start of the year, but it hasn't done it the last few days. Another one that is also holding on a bit nicely, at least at the moment, is the semiconductor industry. You can see here it is still under pressure. It needs to close above 345 here on the semiconductor ETF to re-establish a bullish trend, and that is not really in the cards at the moment, but as we can see, there are still some interest coming in the semiconductor industry, and Nvidia was only just slightly lower yesterday, but it is under pressure here. We are below the cloud. We are below the 155 moving average. Still, the 200 moving average is holding on nicely, but if it starts taking out these lows here from earlier this month, well, then we could be looking at the key support area here around 170 on Nvidia. So it doesn't look too good for most sectors, to say the least, at the moment. Nasdaq 100 lower yesterday, or 1.4%, and looks quite heavy. Negative sentiment on the R side. We are in a bearish trend. We could see it dropping to 24,000 here in the coming days, going into next week maybe. Pre-markets, not much development. Here is the future. But it is below the 200 moving average. We are in a negative sentiment and bearish trend. 24,000 is in sight once again. The S&P 500 also lower yesterday. Support here around 6,600, but could drop all the way down to 6,534. This is the S&P 500 cash index. If it takes out that and closes below, that could become really, really ugly. So here we have the pre-markets, not much change there. The Dow Jones index, let's remove this one, also lower yesterday, looking now at 45,830, 45,387 support area. We could see it down to that level. That will only be probably the big oil companies that will hold it up a little bit. The small caps also lower, but still above 245 here on the ICS Russell 2000 ETF. So still holding on a little bit, but it is in a bearish trend, and I think it will take out the support there in the coming days. Seng, yeah, it is also still in a bearish trend. Couldn't get back above 26,500, and that it was not a surprise. So also I think we'll see that sliding lower here in the coming days. Nikkei also under pressure. Below the cloud now, just above the 100 moving average. That seems to be key, but we are in negative sentiment. This is the future. It should be noted, by the way. We could see a retest of the 51,170 key strong support down here. That should be observed. European markets was also fairly weak yesterday. Tried to crawl higher, but got rejected at the 100 moving average right there. And we are set to open a little bit lower here this morning. As you can see, it also followed, continued to sell off in the after market closed, and we are just above the 100 moving average there. I think we could see a pressure further lower. So let's see what happens when the market opens. DAX also opened higher but couldn't hold on, and also sold, continues to selling pressure throughout the evening after market close, and we are down here again around 23,000. So let's have a look at maybe the weekly. We are actually establishing a bearish trend. Let's go back to the cash index. It's still holding on. If it takes out the lows there from last week at 22,927, well, then it is really bad times because we don't have that much strong support. We'll find some, but it could be coming. We do have the cloud area, and we do have the 100 moving average coming up, but it looks it will look quite heavy to say the least. Let's draw a trend line. We can draw it right there because there is some support here around the 22,235. On euro dollar, didn't correct much. It only corrected 50%, as we can see here on the daily chart, and then it got rejected. It is in a bearish trend. We can see all the moving averages are declining. Sometime next week, maybe end of next week, we will see some crossovers or crossing belows, and that we could put further pressure on it. Negative sentiment on the RSI. We can see here on the weekly 113.90. That is the low here. But if it takes out the lows here from the 16th of March, just around 114.07, basically here around 114, some strong interest. If it takes out that, well, then suddenly we are in for probably a rough ride lower towards these levels here around 111.60 and 110.60. So in the region around 110 here could be seen. That could be quite heavy to say the least. So we will keep an eye on that. Sterling dollar also got rejected here, and let's just zoom in just very quickly. Got rejected at a 61.8 retracement there at 133.73, and the upper rising trend line is still dragging on it. Negative sentiment, no divergence, indicating lower levels. If it takes out the lows here from also the 16s, well, then we could be in for much lower levels in the region around 130. It won't happen in one day, obviously, but it could happen in a week or two. Then we have the 100 weekly moving average coming up, giving us some support, and it's still positive sentiment here on the RSI, but that will probably move back into negative if we take out the lows here from the 16s. Euro sterling bounced here a few days ago, but it hasn't really done much since. It is in a bearish trend, and if it takes out the lows there from also the 16s, then we could see much lower levels, but for now it is still holding on. So let's see, can still crawl back up to around the 86.66 level. Yen pairs, the dollar yen, a lot of volatility, and it doesn't seem like it really want to do a correction. So what I would say is that if it takes out to the downside the lows from yesterday, then we'll see a correction. It's still possible we could see that, but in the bigger picture, we are in a bullish trend, and we are likely to push towards these peaks here just below 162. So keep an eye on these levels there. There's a little bit of support here, 158.50. If it takes out that, then we're likely to have a larger correction. And how big could it be? Well, that's what we can see here. If we again apply this Fibonacci there, well, then there's a little bit of support here just around 158, but it could dip back all the way down to around 157, the 38.2 retracement. But then we have the 55 100 moving average coming up, giving us some support. So it's still a bullish trend despite possible correction. Euro-yen still locked in here between 181.80 and 184.75. Aussie yen still in this bullish trend there. Not really much to say other than that. If it takes out the lows there from the 16th of March, then we could see a test in the lower rising trend line, possibly dipping down to 110. But the trend is still in bullish. Sterling yen, well, it is still 213.30. Needs to take out to the other side, which I believe it will. It's not a promise because there's no certainties in the market. We're still above this rising trend line here. But if it takes out the rising trend line, and if it takes out the dip down here, right there from the 16s also, so 16 seems to be the lows for some pairs that really is of interest. So 210.75 here, if it takes out, well, then we can suddenly see a dip down to 209.80. The 786 retracement may be lower, but for now still a bullish trend. On the Aussie dollar, a lot of volatility, but didn't really get anywhere. Bigger range here, 69.45. But we are in a slightly bullish trend still. If it takes out the peak from yesterday at 71.25, then I think we'll see a push up to 72 once again, possibly higher. Dollar Canada, let's just move it in there. Could test the resistance here, and I wouldn't be too surprised to see it pushing higher towards the 138 level here, where we have then the 100 moving average coming down, cross down below the 200. So there's a lot of pressure. And look at this, we still have the RSI once again being rejected at the 60 threshold. Will it also be that if it does close above, it can get it back above, and if dollar Canada moves back above 137.5, then we could re-establish a bullish trend, but keep an eye on that one. Sterling Canada rejected yesterday at the resistance there at 183.25, and now setting back. And let's see if it can have another go at it and push higher. If it takes it out, well, then there is potential higher to 184, 185. Euro Swiss slowly crawling higher, spiked up to 91, can still push higher to the 786 retracement there at 91.10. If it takes out the lows from yesterday, then downtrend could resume. That the low here at 90.40, then we could see a downtrend resume after this correction there. The dollar Swiss pushing higher towards the 786 retracement and the 200 moving average, just around 79.45.50 here. We are in a bullish trend, positive sentiment on the RSI, but it could be stopped up here, and then maybe a little bit of setback. If it takes it out, and given the fact that euro dollar seems quite heavy, that could play out, that we see dollar Swiss taking out this level here, and also the 200 moving average. Maybe it will hold the first time, but I think it will push higher. We are in a bullish trend, as we can see here, and we are likely to push higher above 80, and these peaks here, that is not unlikely. If it takes out the lows from yesterday, well, then there's still strong support here at 78 level. The dollar index, will it have another go at the 100.35 resistance? I think it will. Positive sentiment on the RSI, no divergence, likely to push higher if it stays above the lows from yesterday. If it takes out the lows from yesterday, well, then we can see a correction down to around 98.50. But as you can see here on the weekly, what it would mean, if it takes out 100.35, well, then there is no strong resistance. Of course, we will find some resistance levels short term, but 101.82 is the next target area for the dollar index. there will be a little bit between that, but for now it seems like that's where we are headed at the moment. RSI weekly being rejected at 60 threshold, that will also be key to watch. Metals and golds, and warned about it yesterday that it could set back, and it did, and it also just with ease took out the support there at 48.40 and is headed towards 46.58, and could possibly also dip below that. Negative sentiment on the RSI. 100 moving average coming up here though, but it looks fairly heavy. And what we can also do after breaking this channel-like pattern, we can set some levels there, Fibonacci levels. I would actually prefer to do it from here, because then you have the entire uptrend, and we have taken out the 61.8 retracement there, and the 786 is just above the 100 moving average and just there below that little support there. So in this region here, I think we could see a dipping to that level, and then I think we'll see a bounce. But we have established a bearish trend on gold, so it looks quite heavy at the moment. The silver, same picture really, currently below the 100 moving average, and I think we'll see it testing $70, and it could actually push lower towards this spike down there at 64 maybe even. So let's see about that, but for now also quite heavy. I think we could see a little bit of a bounce from around $70, but it seems like that we are headed towards lower levels. The platinum also, despite the little bounce it did there, now it's taking out some support here, and I think we'll see it sliding lower towards 1880, possibly lower. It's not the strongest one, but it is fairly strong. Copper also taking out some supports there with a bang yesterday, just went straight through 562 and 553. So next one, that one is not the one. Next one, let's use this one. We are then possibly down in the region around 531, 525. We will have the 200 moving average coming up there, will give some support, but we are quite heavy at the moment. And what we can see, it looks like you can see a bit of a complex shoulder. We actually have two shoulders there, then a head and a couple of shoulders here, and that actually gives it potential at least down to the 531, 525 area here on the short term. So metals cheaper, maybe that's why the interest rates are fairly heavy at the moment. But all right, let's move on to the oil market, because there's some really interesting development on the crude oil. The WTI hasn't done much overnight. I would say between 102.42 and 91.96. That is the range it needs to break out of for direction. It is currently in this range bound here, but look at what has happened. I had to look twice, actually 3 times, on the Brent crude oil, because that has actually pushed higher. And I said yesterday, if it takes out the peak there from the 16th on Monday, then we are likely in for a much higher levels on Brent crude oil. And also, actually, I'm surprised that WTI and Brent crude oil is not following each other that much. And you can check out my former colleague Ole Hansen. He will probably have some explanation why this is. I haven't digged into it, but Brent crude oil pushed higher and is getting closer to the 120 again. And I think that we could see much higher levels on, as I said, there is potential higher. And also, if we look at the weekly chart, let's have a look here. Well, 125, possibly higher, 140. And I actually have an indicator I showed a couple of days ago that was pointing to $161 on crude oil. So looks very strong. Also, the European nat gas exploded there this morning, 75 euros. And let's have a look at the weekly where we are. And let me just zoom in there. Oh, sorry about that. Let me expand it so you can really see what's going on here. Oops, sorry. Here we are. So really push up here to 138 protection of this downtrend here. That's why they hit almost overshoot it a little bit. And then it has set back. So extremely volatile. So you really need to if you're trading this, be careful, and that would you will have to look at intradays and also, of course, other information. But we are in a strong bullish trend there also on nat gas. However, if you can see it starts sliding back here, so maybe it will fall because the RSI didn't really follow through there. The US nat gas, well, moved a little bit yesterday, but still it is in region around $3. So it's basically just this area here, 277 and 350 to the upper side. Then we have 366 before it will take off. And again, with these markets at the moment, maybe something could play out. The US 10-year Treasury yields had a correction below the 200 moving average and then bounced back, and we could see it testing 430. I actually think it will take out the spike up here from a couple of days ago. We can actually see it maybe all the way up to 435. On the European yields, after a correction, didn't move all the way down to the 38.2 retracement before rebounding, and I think we could rebound. So there is a fear of inflation because of these elevated energy prices, despite the fact that, well, maybe it helps a little bit that the copper prices have come down somewhat. So that will maybe dampen the fear for inflation a little bit. But again, oil is such a big part of our economy still. UK hasn't opened just yet, but I think we'll see it pushing higher. But key resistance here up in the region around 485, 486. The Japanese 10 still in a bullish trend, but key resistance there around 231. The crypto got rejected. It actually seemed like it will. Well, the bullish trend is still intact, but you see it got beaten down here over the past 24, 36 hours, setting back there. So let's see what will happen in the next couple of days. Will it slide further back, and then we are stuck in this range here again? Same picture on Ethereum, really got rejected there at 38.2 retracement. All right, that's all for today. Have a nice day and keep charting out there. Be careful, it's quite volatile.